Hello everybody, in this video lecture we will cover energy and metabolism within a cell. So this is a PowerPoint that I will use. Let's go ahead and begin. So energy is capacity to do work. And metabolism is all the chemical reactions that take place inside cells, including those that consume or generate energy. So over here you can see a diagram or picture of energy and human life. So when we eat food, this food contains chemicals. Carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and others. Inside this food, we have chemical energy. So this chemical energy will be converted into ATP and its body's energy currency. So that's the molecules that will be used for you to move your body, for your heart to beat, for your kidney to filter your blood, for your liver to store some products or secrete bile, right? So this ATP will be used for your functions, right? So your organism can function. And when you convert this chemical energy into energy of ATP, you break down these large organic molecules. That will be your catabolism, that is part of metabolism. And let's say when you build your muscles, you make another proteins maybe, or lipids, that will be your anabolism, that is also part of metabolism. But doing it, you will create chemical waste, carbon dioxide and water, some heat will be released, right? So that's the energy conversion from chemical energy of food into chemical energy of ATP, and then into maybe kinetic energy of movement. Some waste product also will be produced as carbon dioxide, water, and energy transformation is not very efficient. Lots of it will be released in the form of heat that you cannot use anymore, right? So that's your metabolism, conversion of energy, your catabolism, breaking these molecules, your anabolism, building your body, right? That's all part of metabolic processes, and energy conversion will happen from one form to another. Now, metabolic pathway is a series of chemical reactions that take a starting molecule and modifies it step by step through a series of metabolic intermediates, eventually yielding a final product. So metabolic pathway is just the whole chain of chemical reaction from, let's say, reactant to the products. Because of all chemical reactions in your body, it's called metabolism. Metabolic pathway has two parts. Anabolic reaction, when small molecules are built into large molecules. So that's your synthesis. So you're making bigger from smaller parts, and energy is required. And another part of metabolic pathway are catabolic reaction, when large molecules are broken down into small ones, right? So here's a bigger molecule, you break it into smaller, and energy is released. And because anabolic reaction require energy, catabolic release energy, you can see here how they work together, and you can perform your metabolic function, right? So metabolic pathway, you're giving example over here. In sugar metabolism, the first metabolic pathway synthesizes sugar from smaller molecules, and the other pathway breaks sugar down to smaller molecules. All right, so let's say when we make sugar, well, okay, so here, if we are referring it to the humans, like let's say to you and me, I hope I'm still human, right? Okay, so you store sugar in the form of glycogen. So you attach sugar molecules making this glycogen. You store it in your liver, in your muscles. And when you need energy, you can break this glycogen into sugar, into glucose, release energy, right? So that will be your catabolic part of metabolic pathway. The first law of thermodynamics states that the total amount of energy in the universe is constant and conserved. That's amazing, right? The amount of energy in universe is always constant. What does it mean? If it's constant, it means energy cannot be created. And if it's constant, it means energy cannot be destroyed. There has always been and always will be exactly the same amount of energy in the universe. Energy exists in many different forms. Energy may be transferred from place to place or transformed into different forms, but it cannot be created or destroyed. So here, example of energy transformations. Food, right? Food, chemical energy, can be transformed into kinetic energy of your body. You can move your body. You can ride your bike, bicycle, car. You can walk because you can. Your cells are capable of this transformation. Chemical energy from food to kinetic energy of movement. Plants can convert light energy into chemical energy of food. So what is inside this leaf? This is just the whole bunch of glucose joined together. And where this glucose came from? Glucose came from carbon dioxide and water, and energy that allow you to allow plants to make sugar from carbon dioxide and water comes from the sun. So that's also transformation of energy from light to chemical. The second law of thermodynamics says that energy will always be lost as heat in energy transfer or transformation. So that means we cannot use all the energy. Lots of it, about 60%, more than half even, will be lost from the system. Well, energy cannot be lost from universe, right? But from usable energy from the system, it can be dissipated in the form of heat, right? So let's say we have some amount of energy available for plants, and right, so plants then through the decomposition or consumers that live because of this energy, but lots of it is lost as a heat, and lots of energy from the sun as a heat energy cannot be used for metabolic processes. So heat energy cannot be used by your cell, by plant cell, by any cells to do cellular work. That's interesting, right? So here's example. Let's say you have a house plant, and you're gonna put this plant inside your closet. There is no light in the closet, and you can even put a nice heater inside that closet, and so the temperature gonna be nice and warm. You can water your plant, you can add a whole bunch of fertilizer, so you have heat energy because it's warm inside your closet, inside your closet, right? But your plant will die, right? So if you put a plant inside a closet, and if your plant doesn't receive light, it receives heat and water and carbon dioxide and fertilizer and lots of love, but it doesn't receive light, it will die because heat energy cannot be used for biological processes inside plant cells. Plant cells will die. They will not be able to make ATP. Animals as well, right? Animals, people. We cannot live because of the heat energy. We need food, right? You give me a lot of heat, You can even give me a lot of light and water and oxygen. You don't give me food, I'm not gonna live very long, right? So I need chemical energy of food. So heat is good really for nothing, just to keep our bodies warm. Now ATP. So here's a picture of ATP. ATP is a nucleotide. It has a ribose, sugar, adenosine, adenine. It's not really adenosine. It's a adenine. That's nitrogenous base. So together it's adenosine and 3-phosphate group attached. Now those lines, they represent all these lines and this line and even these lines, that all really represent covalent bonds, chemical bonds. Now inside these chemical bonds, this molecule stores energy, right? Lots of energy in this last bond, some energy and little energy in this bond. So why cells need ATP? So the challenge for all living organisms is to obtain energy from their surroundings in forms that they can transform into usable energy to do work. So you can eat your food, right? But to move your muscles, you cannot use this energy stored in chemical energy inside the food. So when you eat your food, you get chemical energy, but that energy needs to be transformed into energy of ATP, and this ATP will allow you to move your muscles. That's to do work. So living cells evolved to meet this challenge. Chemical energy stored within organic molecules such as sugar and fats is transferred and transformed through a series of cellular chemical reactions into energy within a molecule of ATP. So ATP is like a rechargeable battery. It stores energy obtained from food and releases it later as needed. So you cannot store large amount of energy inside your cells, really. It will just destroy your cells. Like too much energy inside the cell, that's not good. So you eat your food. Now that chemical energy in your food will be used to store it inside this ATP, this rechargeable battery. And then when you need it, you release it using this ATP, parenthesis, all right, batteries, or quotes batteries, right? Of course, it's not a battery. This is just an analogy to allow you to, better understand how ATP works. ATP, name for ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and that's because, again, we have adenine, ribose, and 3-phosphate group. Consists of organic molecule called adenosine plus a tail of 3-phosphate groups. So here's our ATP, adenosine triphosphate. ATP is broken down to ADP, adenosine diphosphate, in a phosphate group, and energy is released, right? So right there in this bond, we have most energy stored, right? Like you store in your battery. So that's energy used for you to move your muscles, to talk, to hear, to see, for all your internal organs to work, for your muscles to contract, right? That's the energy of ATP that drive biological processes, biochemical processes inside your cells. So when cell use ATP, right? So cell uses glucose and oxygen. Cell oxidize glucose, so it's break glucose from the food in the presence of oxygen. This is transformation of chemical energy into ATP, right? And then ATP into kinetic energy. So you use glucose and oxygen, some heat is released, but ATP is synthesized, and ATP is energy for cellular work and some byproduct, carbon dioxide and water. So they compare it with your car. So for your car to move, movement of a car is the kinetic energy of movement. Your car cannot move without fuel. So you put your gas and you need to burn these gasoline molecules, octane, in the presence of oxygen, called combustion. So you burn your fuel and your car moves, and your car produces waste product, carbon dioxide and water. That's waste product poor in chemical energy. Some is released in the form of heat, but this is conversion. We convert one form of energy, your gas, into kinetic energy. Heat is lost, waste product is formed. The same, similar with a cell, but cell does not use a gas, it uses sugar from food, oxygen. And this reaction is not combustion, but cellular respiration. They call it respiration because oxygen goes in, carbon dioxide goes out, like when you breathe. Through cellular respiration, instead of kinetic energy, we make ATP, and we make energy waste product, waste product that poor in energy, carbon dioxide and water. Free energy is usable energy on energy that is available to do work. This small amount of energy input necessary for all chemical reaction to occur and called the activation energy. If we have this reactants, for this reactants to become a product, even if energy will be released, but first you need to invest some energy. That's the activation energy need to be invested. It's like when you start your business, you need to invest your money then to get even more money, right? So over here, reactants have more energy than products. If reactants has more energy than products, that energy was released, but you still need activation energy to start chemical reaction. So types of chemical reaction, we can divide them into two groups, endergonic reaction and exergonic reaction. Endergonic reaction require energy. Those reactions require energy. Exergonic reaction release energy. Relative to biology, two reactions that show us endergonic and exergonic are photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So photosynthesis happens inside cells of photosynthetic organisms, such as plants. So plants are capable of using carbon dioxide and water, combine them together to make glucose. And this is byproduct, oxygen and water, right? So water, always water, right? So, but here, so plants can combine carbon dioxide and water to make sugar and oxygen, but this requires energy to do this because carbon dioxide and water, they're very low in energy and sugar rich in energy. So how you start with little energy and get a lot, how you start with $10 and end up with 100, you need some investment. So here will be energy of the light, right? So light energy now will be converted into chemical energy. And this process is called photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is not making sugar from light. You cannot make sugar from light. For sugar, you need carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, right? So you need to make sugar from carbon dioxide and water, but you need light energy to do it. And this light energy you store inside sugar. That does make sense? It's like if you want to make pancakes, you cannot make pancakes just from your gas stove. You use your stove to cook pancakes, but you still need flour, buttermilk, sugar, and so on. To make sugar, you need carbon dioxide and water and light energy. And light energy now is not lost. Some of it is lost, but 40% of this light energy is stored inside this sugar molecule. So this is endergonic reaction, energy requiring But now also inside your cells, now when you eat the sugar in your food, when you get the sugar from your food, you can break down those chemical bonds. You need oxygen to do it. And you're making carbon dioxide and water, and you're making ATPs. Right, so let's look over here. It shows us that glucose, metabolism of the glucose, that are exergonic reaction, cellular respiration, that's carbon dioxide and water and heat. Those are our byproducts. But the major point is to make this ATP. Now this ATP energy can be used, for example, for protein synthesis inside your cells, right? So it's require energy. This is endergonic reaction. This ADP, this last bond is broken over here. So now we have ADP, that molecule with less energy, right? So we need to attach this phosphate group back to ADP through cellular respiration. What is an enzyme and why is it important in cellular processes? Enzymes are catalytic molecules that speed up chemical reactions. What enzymes do, they lower the energy of activations. Most enzymes are proteins. They do not change the reaction. They are unharmed and can be reused, and they're very specific. One enzyme, one substrate, one reaction, one function. Excuse me. So here again, analogy of the enzyme action. So if you have reactants and you need to get products, you still need some amount of activation energy. This is activation energy barrier. So it takes lots of time and efforts to jump over this barrier. What enzymes do, they just lower this barrier. So they reduce the amount of activation energy and reaction proceed very quickly. So here's example of enzyme, and again, this is just a diagram, but enzymes, they have active site, and active site, this is where the substrate binds and chemical reaction occur. Two parts of active site, substrate binding site and catalytic site. So here's active site, anything that binds to enzyme is called substrate. So substrate binds to the active site. Now then we have some conformational change in the shape. And this example maybe, just loosens this, makes those chemical bonds not that strong, right? And allow them to be broken. And we release the product. So enzyme is not used, is not changed, so it can now catalyze another reaction. So active site where the substrate binds, allosteric site, any other site rather than this active. So it can be on a side, right? And substrate is the molecule or molecules the enzyme will change or react with. Factors that influence enzyme activity: amount of substrate or enzyme, pH, acidity or acidic or basic, temperature, because temperature denature or slow down enzymes, ionic concentration, for example, high sodium concentration can inhibit enzyme activities. So all enzymes, they have their optimal temperature when they work the best, right? So here you can see how temperature affects the enzyme activity. So the most human enzyme maximum activity is about body temperature, 98.6. So activity increases and it reaches its maximum and it decreases when temperature goes up. The same with pH. Now pH depends what enzyme it is. If it's a pepsin, for example, that's enzyme found in your stomach. And your stomach is very acidic, pH 2. So that enzyme is most active at this pH 2. And again, we will see this increase in activity, reaching this optimal activity and then decline. But if we say, talking about, let's say, trypsin found in your small intestine, and pH in your small intestine is about, 8, pH 8. So that's where maximum activity occur. Now, pepsin not gonna work in the small intestine, and trypsin not gonna work in the stomach. So enzymes, they have their optimal pH, they have their optimal temperature. Of course, we increase the amount of enzyme, we speed up reaction. We increase the amount of substrate, we speed up the reaction. We increase the concentration of some ions, we will decrease the rate of reaction. Enzymes inhibitors are poisons. Those are chemicals that prevent a substrate from attaching to an enzyme. So here's the enzyme. Remember, we talk about active site, and this is substrate. So substrate binds, chemical energy happens. This is allosteric site. So it's, remember, we talk about any other binding site, right? So this is allosteric. So we have two types of inhibition. Competitive inhibitor, they compete with the substrate for active sites. So instead of substrate, now this molecule binds, so it prevents reaction from happening. Or we can have non-competitive inhibitor. This one binds to allosteric site, and because of this binding, the active site changes its shape, so substrate still cannot bind. Example would be cyanide. Cyanide interferes with an enzyme, cytochrome excitase, in cellular respiration. So cyanide is a very dangerous poison. And what it does, it just binds to enzyme and it shuts down cellular respiration. And cellular respiration is the metabolic pathway for ATP synthesis. Now, when your cells cannot make ATP, they start dying. That's why cyanide is so dangerous. So here's our competitive inhibitor that binds to active site of enzyme, competes with substrate, and non-competitive inhibitor binds to the allosteric site. Allosteric inhibitor, when it binds enzyme, prevents the substrate from binding, and enzymes remains inactive, right? This is pretty much what we just talked in the previous picture, right? So again, this is active site, substrate, this is allosteric site. So is it competitive inhibition or non-competitive inhibition? So enzymes inhibitors are not always bad. Some of them are very good. Let's say antibiotics are enzyme inhibitors. They inhibit bacterial enzymes, so bacteria cannot function. Aspirin and Advil inhibit enzymes that convert phospholipids into prostaglandins, and this decreases inflammation because prostaglandins, they are inflammatory chemicals. So if your cells don't make inflammatory chemicals, inflammation goes down. Lipitor is a drug that inhibits not he enzyme, but the enzymes that convert fatty acid into cholesterol. So let's say if people have high cholesterol level in their blood, they are prescribed Lipitor, and fatty acids that they get from their diet cannot be converted into cholesterol because Lipitor inhibits that enzyme that does this, right? This is ibuprofen, shows ibuprofen mimics arachidonic acid. So it just prevent conversion into prostaglandins. So if you don't prostaglandins, then inflammation goes down. Okay, so that was the very last slide. I just want to remind you that we cover energy and metabolism. We talk about metabolic pathways. We talk about little bit thermodynamics, ATP, and enzymes. Thank you for watching, and I hope it was helpful.